This is a book that I tried to write a long time ago. I haven't been able to finish it. So, what is the measure of the promised one? How does one know that the promised one is from God or is a fake? Like the song, How Will I Know If This Will Be My Faith? So, there's the Great Pyramid of Egypt and the internal passageway system. As you can see, the middle of it is separated by a imaginary purple line, but it lines up with a great step at the top of the grand gallery in the middle, as well as the Queen's Chamber. The center of it is like a giant arrow pointing towards the great step, and that's ultimately the most pivotal key point in the entire Great Pyramid prophecy. So you see the great step at the top, in the middle. And I'll get to why that's special later. But basically, a quick summary is that the internal passageway system of the Great Pyramid it's like a calendar, a divine calendar, where God tells mankind when He's going to send the promised one. And there's prophecy about this in the Bible. And there are many prophecies in the Bible about when God will send the promised ones. One of them is repeated over 12 times. Well, that date that's repeated over 12 times, that is where the great step is. That's what the great step represents. And, this calendar takes approximately an inch for a year. But this pyramid chronology, it also foretells all of the promised ones, including Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, Baha'u'llah. It foretells Moses when he came, and it has a date for Abraham too. It even has the creation date on it. It's all written down, and exactly at the point where a sacred event takes place, like the promised one begins his ministry, that's when a 3D representation of it occurs, a geometric design that represents this symbolically. So whereas this ascending passage here is very cramped and one has to crawl up it, the Grand Gallery is very tall. It exits into the Grand Gallery, and there's a lot of room, and you can't reach the ceiling. It's high up. So this point where it exits into the Grand Gallery, that comes to the date of when Jesus Christ began his ministry. And this is confirmed in Scripture, Luke 3:23. Jesus was around 30 years old when he began his ministry. So, obviously, more happened. More happened than just the Grand Gallery opening up. You see a well shaft dropping down and this horizontal chamber going to the Queen's chamber. So yeah, this is a horizontal passage going to the Queen's chamber. You have passages and chambers. So where this Great Pyramid is located is in Africa. Now for some reason they call this region, if you look at the horn on this woman's forehead, it has a horn. They call that the Horn of Africa. So that got me wondering, why is it called that? And if you look at it, like to me, it looks like a woman's face. If you look at it with your imagination, you might see that too. So Lake Victoria is the blue in the eye. and I put a white region around it to emphasize that that's where the eye is. And instead of her crying, Mother Africa has a river flowing north from Lake Victoria. You know, most major rivers in the world, they don't flow north. They all flow south. This one's unique for some reason. So if you go to the mouth of the river, where it exits into the Mediterranean Sea, actually I have something pointing to it. There's a delta, a triangle, and as you can see, it's upside down. And at the apex of the delta, that is the top of the delta, which in this case is the bottom, that's where the Great Pyramid is located. There is a land border. A land border that separates Upper Egypt from Lower Egypt around the area. That is elevation-wise. So, you know, it flows up, so the lower part is in the north. And the upper region, Upper Egypt, is in the south. And it's like some sort of plateau or cliff. And it's not exactly on the border of Egypt, but it's in the midst of Egypt. That is, it's inside the borders. So why does that matter? Well, there's a prophecy about it in the Bible. And the Great Pyramid fulfills that prophecy. This is the most heavy, massive building in the entire world. Let's see what that prophecy is. Okay. It says, in that day, let's put this at the top, there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. See, it's in the middle of the land of Egypt. It's not at the border, it's in the middle, in the midst of it. And a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. So it's on the border as a pillar, but it's also in the midst of Egypt, not on the border. So the Great Pyramid is flat at the top, so it can be seen as like an altar. But as far as it being a pillar, well, that word is identified with a pyramid in another language. It shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors. So it's going to be for a sign and a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. Who is the Lord of hosts? Probably the Lord of the host of angels. Their king. Okay. Possibly a promised one. So if the Nile River could speak, what would it say? Well, the Nile has a mouth. Perhaps it would say what, well, Isaiah says this great pyramid of Egypt, this pillar in the midst of Egypt and at the border, it's a testimony. It's a sign and a witness. That is, you know, a witness, he bears witness to something. He speaks. So what's this pillar and pyramid and an altar at this exact location in the country of Egypt? It's that accurate. It's that pinpointed. What's it say? Well, that's what this book's about. Interestingly, at the location of the lips, there is Maputo, a place in Africa that has ruins that are extremely old. Very, very high walls. extremely high walls, like absurdly high, but also very old. And why was there a village with such high walls? Who knows? What's that telling us? Okay, so in my book, I went over a lot of prophecies that point to the year 1844 AD, when the Bab began his ministry. These prophecies are so involved and so in depth. There's so much to go into. They start from one of the most significant events in religious history, and then the prophecies in the Bible explain that one is to go forward a certain amount of time, like, for example, 390 days, which is 390 years, and then that's when the promised one would come, or usually that's when 1844 AD is taken to and fulfilled with that year. But to give a brief overview of the 1844s, there are 9 prophecies about the number 1260. And this value 1260 is referred to in many variations, such as 42 months in Revelations, a times, and half a time in Daniel, and sometimes just plain old 1260. There's a area in Revelations, like 11 through 13, that they give one 1260 prophecy after the other, including all the variations: 3.5 days, 3.5 times, 3.5 time times half a time, 3.5 years, 42 months, and 1260. Those are the ones I can recall right now. But often the prophecies involve symbols relating to Islam, like, for example, a woman she's clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet like shoes. Well, clothes represents the kingdom, and this great symbol of the kingdom is based on Scripture, on the Bible, such as what happened when King Solomon's son had the kingdom ripped from him and split into 12 pieces. So this is very clearly a symbol of kingly authority and the kingdom that the king rules over. So this woman being clothed in the sun and the moon, the sun being a star, that's a symbol of Islam. She also had 12 stars on her head. In Islam, there are the 12 Imams, which were the head of the faith after Muhammad. So that's a very blatant example, and it just points out 1260 right there. Also, there are prophecies involving a red dragon who's chasing the woman, and this red dragon is also the corrupted and usurped version of Islam started with Muawiyah. But elsewhere, like in Daniel, this number 1260 also represents more than just Islam. It represents something else. It's the understanding of what happened in 1260 that will enable people to see the big picture of the Bible and to be freed from the chains of false beliefs, the grand deception that wreaks havoc in the world of religion. And it will enable mankind to be freed from the little horn and his influences. Because his base are Christians who actually, they don't understand the Bible, they don't understand the prophecies. They have no idea what happened in 1260. If they knew what happened in 1260, like all of it, there would be no room for doubt about the reality of God's religion, the reality of Christianity, and who Christ was and who he was not. And there is only one God, and this is fundamental. Fundamental. So, likewise, look at this Great Pyramid entrance here. There's a picture of four men, and one of them's kind of kneeling and standing over the entrance. He's standing on the wall. That one would crawl down or stoop as one walks, crouches down, and descends the entrance passage. There are two at the bottom standing in front of what is known as the basement sheet. It's a thick floor, but it's really also just one of the steps of the pyramid. The 25th step of the outer step of the Great Pyramid. There are many more prophecies in the Bible pointing to this year, 1844 AD, and the value 1260 points to it very clearly. We'll get to that soon. So let's look at the foundation. It's one way of looking at it anyways. The foundation of this Great Pyramid timeline. So, when you go into the door on the outside of the pyramid, you go down a certain amount of inches, and it takes you to a year. This location, it represents a year, and there are lines sketched in the walls, straight up and down, that is at a 90-degree angle to the entrance angle. So, I guess you can't really call it straight up and down, but it's at an exact 90-degree angle to the entrance passage, the descending passage. And at one time in history, that line in the wall, it pointed to Alcyone, a star in the constellation Taurus. The Taurus is a bull, and Alcyone is in the bull's shoulder. The angle of that scored line was recorded to be 63 degrees and 33 minutes. At the same time in history, the entrance passage pointed to the pole star. The pole star is a star that, let's see, you know that the Earth rotates around an axis, or the North and South Pole is that axis. And if you draw a line extending from that axis at the angle, it points towards the pole star. So when the Earth rotates, if one looks at the stars at night, all the other stars are moving around as it rotates, but the pole star, it doesn't circle around. All the other stars appear to circle around the pole star. And it's always north. That is the northern one on the northern hemisphere. So at that time in history, it pointed to the pole star that was located in the constellation Draco. Draco the dragon, or snake, in his tail. So as time progresses, or processes, the pole star location, it varies. So, in a way, depending on what it's pointing at, it can be used as a calendar in and of itself. So, let's look at this other information here. So, there's the pole star at the top, Thuban. And beneath that is Alcyon, the bull's shoulder. Okay, exact alignment. Angle of scored lines is 63 degrees 33 minutes from south. South equals 180 degrees azimuth. So you can see how aligned Alcyon would be. So why is this alignment important? What does it matter? So let's visualize this. So this alignment pointing to the pole star in Alcyon happened in 2141 BC. Now that scored line is 357 pyramid inches from the entrance. That is on one side, either east or west, whichever side I took my measurements from. The other side is slightly different. But if you average them, the entrance to the Great Pyramid is actually a perfect 25. That is 2500 BC. If I recall that right. It's been a while since I looked at this. But on either the east side or the west side, which I took my measurements from, you start at 2498 BC, and I think the other side's around like 2502 BC, but you go down 357 inches, like I said, you have the scored lines on the wall, and then you have those alignments that took place at that year that represents. So what happened at the beginning of the Great Pyramid, at the beginning of the basement sheet, the beginning of that blue floor, what alignment took place there? Well, all four of the air shafts started pointing at things in the sky that were significant. So let's look at the air shafts here. Here I have the air shafts colored and extending out like an imaginary line into the heavens. And so at that point, like 2498, now just keep in mind that this date is a little fuzzy. 2498 is pretty close to 2499. I mean, 2498, December 19th. Anyways, the date's a little fuzzy. It repeats for a few years. So I could have chose probably 2499 or something like that as well. But there was this alignment at that time, according to the Stellarium program, that's available. I use NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs algorithm to verify these alignments. Yeah, or to find them in any case. So the south side is where the entrance passage is. It's pointing to these two stars near the end of the snake's tail. One of them's Thuban, and the other one is labeled 5 Dre for Draco. The north side is pointed to these two stars. The top one is Alnitak. It represents the Great Pyramid. I'll get into that later. And the one on the bottom, which is circled green, is Thabit. That's a name that means steadfast. And this is all about God's covenant and steadfast faith in that covenant and what God teaches through this Great Pyramid prophecy. So here are the numbers, let's see, of these air shafts. Professor Petrie measured it a long time ago, the 4 air shafts, and later a robot was sent up 3 of them and took measurements as well. They verify what Petrie's measurements were, and they match closely enough to these stars, except for Thuban. Thuban, as you can see, this red line here is a little off, which to me may indicate that it's not exactly pointing to this star, the pole star, but it may be indicating that what it's pointing at is the snake's anatomical proportion on its body to this constellation snake's penis. So if you draw a line between those 2 points, that's where that would be located. And it's not visible in the constellation. There's no star representing it. Well, a snake's penis is hidden. It's hidden behind its skin. It actually has 2 penises. Likewise, on the other side, if you draw a line between these 2 stars, actually, if you look at the bottommost green circle, it's almost next to a similarly, let's see, look at it right there in the top left corner, a similarly bright star, and they're right next to each other in the anatomical position where one's testicles would be. So it would be pointing at this constellation of stick figure man, his testicle, and the other one's pointing at a location on his waist. You draw a line between it, and that would pass over this stick figure man's penis. So what's interesting about this scientifically is that in the middle of Orion's penis is the only place, the only region where stars are created, where stars are born in the universe that can be seen without a telescope. It's visible to the naked eye. So it represents the region of fertility scientifically. And there are many such regions in the universe, but this is the only one that can be seen with the naked eye. Why is it that the Great Pyramid points to this region? And what does that have to do with the entrance passage? Well, let's see, the pole star of the snake in that region representing the snake's penis is pointing down that pole star is aligned with the entrance passage. where the scored line is on the pyramid timeline. So that may be indicating that this reptilian creature, the snake or the dragon, it's pointing towards the descent of religion. And where it leads to has been likened by the Christian scholars who have studied this to a place with a pit that's underground that represents hell. And as far as the other side, where the yellow and orange lines are pointing to the sky, well, that's one air shaft is coming from the king's chamber, and the other one's coming from the queen's chamber. And those are most certainly very sacred. They represent very sacred things. So that is about the covenant in particular, especially when you consider that this constellation is holding a bow. A bow is a symbol of the covenant in the book of Genesis. After Noah is rescued, the rainbow, or the bow in heaven, that's the sign of the covenant. Likewise, the seed of Abraham was blessed, as well as the seed of King David was blessed. These were covenant blessings, and it is from the seed of King David where the messianic lineage comes from, which is why the Bible, the New Testament, opens with Jesus' lineage, showing how he's descended from King David. So if you look at other pictures of Orion, like real pictures, you can see that he's wearing a red sash. That is some sort of like red scarf that goes down his body. And this was an article of clothing that the high priest would wear. There was only one high priest at a time, and he would go into the Holy of Holies, and he could only go in there once a year, and he performed certain rituals for the removal of sin for mankind. So these two items, they indicate that this constellation stick figure man is pointing out the covenant to remind people that the covenant is where it's at. You know, part of the problem in the world of religion is that the world has forgotten the covenant. They have the majority of the Christian religions, their doctrine that they've added on to the words of Jesus, their doctrine that many of the sects have, is not in alignment with the fact that the Messiah is to come from the male sperm descendancy of King David. They teach that because Jesus was born of a virgin, no sperm was involved, and somehow that made him very pure and sinless. And that's why he's sinless, and therefore he's God, and he's part of a trinity of gods. So there's more than one God, and it's just a big corruption snowball. And as long as this corruption exists, it's like a blindfold. It's like chains. The Christians can't see the reality of the promised ones after Jesus Christ, because they see Jesus Christ as God, and the other promised ones as regular men. It's there's this big, like, awful deception and lie that the world is bought into. Well, the Great Pyramid, what its prophecies point out, is the reality of God's religion. So one of the things that this points out is that it has the measurement standard of a pyramid inch for a year. It points that out. So you go down 357 pyramid inches, which is, it's like an inch, a British inch, but it's off a hair. And you also go down 357 years. And you have these two different alignments that occurred at these two different points. And it's showing, it's like putting the measurement standard at the entranceway. And there's Bible prophecy about putting the measure in the gate. I encourage everyone to reproduce my work. I don't know if the newer versions of Stellarium will reproduce the same values that they did for me way back then. I did this work around 2015 after I got lost at sea and rescued. But as you can see, latitude, longitude, altitude, time, it's all there. I chose JPL Horizons as a time correction. That is Jet Propulsion Labs Horizons from NASA. That's what I use for the algorithm to process through time to see where the stars aligned. And you can verify this work for yourself. I encourage you to see with your own eyes, know with your own knowledge, and have true faith that this is very real. All this really took place. And as far as Professor Smith and Professor Petrie go, these people, these were very prominent scholars. Long time ago, they took measurements of the Great Pyramid, angles and lengths, and their work is pivotal. Professor Smith had one of the highest, most renowned scholarly positions in the world, and he gave it up. He lost it when he spent his own money. Because he was a good Christian man, he wanted to get this out to the world. And once he published his book about this, he lost his reputation. Because that's how the scholarly world is. But you can look at the numbers for yourself in his book, and you will see that these numbers add up. Especially if you look at all of his books, including the last one. That's very important when you're doing this research and verifying it and seeing it with your own eyes. So that's how cramped the descending passage or entrance passage is. That's a picture of it. These are some screenshots from Stellarium of the different stars in their positions that I took at that date that's beneath the orange box. At the bottom, the very bottom left, you can see the alignment of the Great Pyramid next to the pyramids that are next to it. You see there's three pyramids right near each other. The Great Pyramid is the biggest. But if you convert the size of these pyramids to the intensity of stars, and you can see that the topmost pyramid is to the right a little bit. It's not in a straight line. Well, that's the orientation of Orion's belt. Let's check that out. You see the yellow circle? That's where the Great Pyramid would be, and the two stars next to it are oriented like the Great Pyramid and the pyramids next to it. Okay, so let's look at a real picture. This one shows a little bit better how bright the stars are. The one on the rightmost one is a little dimmer. I didn't discover this, someone else did. So if you look at the snake at the bottom of the screen, it looks like a snake. There's no doubt about it. It has that shape. And there's an artist's rendition of Orion. Now, I don't know what the mythology is about Orion. I tried to look it up and it just didn't interest me. And as far as Orion being a false god, um, people may have worshipped him as a false god, but, you know, that's not why I'm interested in this. I'm interested in it because it's a stick figure of a man, obviously a stick figure of a man, and it's pointed to by the Great Pyramid. So I'm not interested in, anyone's belief about it being a false god. So, yeah, that's not what I'm pointing out. Things in the heaven, I believe that only God is to be worshipped, not anything else, not anybody else. So let's see. The red star is Betelgeuse. That's his shoulder at the top. One of them. And you can almost make out the sash, the red sash, in the top left corner going down. That's Bernard's Loop. You'll see it better in other pictures. And you can even see that region at the very top. That's Orion's Nebula. It's kind of orange in this picture, but that's, like I said, that's the only nebula visible to the naked eye where stars are created. Right in the middle of the creation organ of a man that this represents anatomically. This is a picture of a nebula. They're very beautiful. They have many colors like the rainbow. Huh. Some of them even look like people to me. So as you can see, the North Star changes over time. In 2141 BC, it was at Thuban. But today, it's at the end of that wing, which we call the Dipper. Is it the Little Dipper? And Polaris, like the end of the handle. Who knows where it will be in the future? It will be at the top of the house at one time, 2,000 years from now. There is Bible prophecy about these stars that the pyramid points to, or Scripture. He which alone treadeth upon the waves of the sea, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. Behold, he taketh away, who can hinder him? Who will say unto him, What doest thou? If God will not withdraw his anger, the proud helpers do stoop under him. Ah, I like this one. Hate the evil and love the good, and establish judgment in the gate. It may be that the Lord God of hosts will be gracious unto the remnant of Joseph. Establish judgment in the gate. That's the measuring standard. If you recall, the pyramid inch at the entrance of the Great Pyramid being represented by the alignments. Seek him that maketh the 7 stars, and Orion. The 7 stars are the Pleiades, and Alcyon is in the Pleiades. They're very beautiful stars. That's the constellation Taurus. It's at his shoulder. For some reason, the shoulder just keeps being pointed out in these correlations, these patterns. They hate him that rebuketh in the gate, establish judgment in the gate. It is not like the Bible is just full of texts about all the different stars in the universe. The Bible doesn't mention many constellations. It really doesn't. But the few that it does, the Great Pyramid points to. Now, as far as the little bear, I'm not sure that's related. But these stars that I mentioned, many of them they have text about them, such as Job. Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee. I'm skipping parts. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, and who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? Shall thy proud waves be stayed? The high arm shall be broken. Again, that shoulder. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in the depths, in search of the depth? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare, if thou knowest it all. To cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there are no men. Hath the rain a father, or who hath begotten the drops of dew? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? So there again you have the Alcyon, the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, and Orion. Can you loose the bands of Orion? Apparently that's may refer to his belt. And what does loosening the belt of Orion have to do with anything in the Bible? Perhaps we're going into that now. Gird up now thy loins like a man. What came to me? Okay. Who hath laid the measures thereof? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who shut up the sea with doors? Yeah. Okay. So scholars who studied the Great Pyramid, they found many fascinating things. Like, it holds a wealth of scientific knowledge and religious knowledge as well. One of the things found is that it has the creation date recorded. So this diagram explains it. It's using this measurement here taken by Smith or Petrie of the angle of the descending passage, the entrance passage. And I use trigonometry to verify what these other scholars have discovered, that the creation date is recorded. And they're right. It does match up. However, there were many data points that I could have used for the region of where the outside of the Great Pyramid is. Is it the outer edge of the casing stone? Is it where the casing stone is sitting? Which one do I use? I could have chose the different things, but I mean, it's a little fuzzy. David Davidson, he calculated 4000 BC to be the creation point, but I chose a different data point to match with the well-known. It's more popularly believed that the creation date was 4004 BC, but I think David Davidson was more right. So there are, as you can see, there are other dates that it points to also. There's the point of intersection, one of the 1260 Exodus dates. The crucifixion date is 34 AD. Christ began his ministry in 30 AD. So you can see somehow that doesn't match up, but that's all right. 1844 AD is the end of an age when the Bob began his ministry. 1260 was believed to be the date of the Exodus, but there's like 3 top contenders, and that's one of them. It could also be the point of intersection. So let's just look at these angles and stuff. So you see all the little letters, they all indicate like where different things took place. So, as you can see, we'll explain this here. The descending passage, this starts around 2500 BC. It goes down, you have an alignment at the entrance, and you have an alignment at the scored lines in the wall, defining a pyramidage, the divine measure, the unit of standard, the judgment standard. You go down to the point of intersection where the ascending passage intersects with the descending passage, and that's at around 1512 BC. There is a red granite plug blocking it. Now, I'm using all these terms. They were defined by Smith and Petrie way back a long time ago in the 1800s. So, I calculate that the top of the scored line, the top of the granite plug is 1260 BC. That's important because the value 1260, again, is repeated 9 times in the Bible. And it's at this point, for the point of intersection, when you start going upwards, that's when you get to like divine religion going in the positive direction. And if you take the imaginary line all the way down, you get the creation date, continue up, you get 1260 BC, which represents 1844 AD in a way. Well, you go 1290 pyramid inches from there to the entrance to the Grand Gallery, like right there at the left. And you get when Jesus Christ began his ministry. But there's also something indicating 34 AD as well, when Jesus died on the cross. And these values are verified in the Bible. Luke 3:23, Jesus was 30 years old when he began his ministry. And John records the 4 Passovers, that Jesus celebrated in Jerusalem. It's an annual event, so we know that his ministry lasted 4 years. So, just by that information alone, we know when Jesus began his ministry and when he was crucified. And it matches up perfectly. And this is all based on the Bible, not based on any other sources, just the Bible. That's enough. That's where it matches to. The value 1290 is also significant. Again, there are 1290 pyramid inches that separate these 2 points. The significance of that number is that it involves the return of Jesus Christ very clearly in Bible prophecy. Jesus, like one of his answers of when the end of the age will be and when he's going to return, is something involving 1260, a very direct reference to 1290, not 1260, but 1290. Well, this relationship is mirrored in the hellish layer. You have the 1260, the 1290, and the 30 and 34 AD. That's mirrored over here. See at the bottom? 1260 BC, and then 1290 inches away is 30 to 34 AD. There are spikes or projections at the end of the wall. They're 4 inches long. The base of it is 34 AD. The tips of it represents 30 AD. But this is like the hellish pit. This pit descends downward, but you can't see it, like right there. So, let's see. From the point of intersection, the split here, you can either go upwards to 34 AD at the beginning of the Grand Gallery, or you could go downwards Now what I did is I divided by 12. So 12 pyramid niches for a year. That's what I took for the distance between the point of intersection to the bottom of the subterranean level. So it's a pyramid foot to a year. And there's one of the 1260 prophecies is saying that the outer court is going to be trampled underfoot for 1260. So that's a clear reference in Revelations that points to this area. And 1260, the value 1260, in a way, it represents Islam. And this passage was discovered by an Islamic leader, like the top leader of the Islamic religion politically, Caliph Mahmud, a long time ago. So you have this whole region is underground. You see that the portion with a white background, that's underground. The Great Pyramid itself, with the black area, that's above ground. So they call that the subterranean area, I suppose, but this is the subterranean level, subterranean passage. And because it's underground, again, it's hellish. And another important thing is, usually the Great Pyramid you can measure along the floor, but in the subterranean level, the floor is all dilapidated and falling apart, brittle and nasty. It's unfinished, but the ceiling is pristine. So I took the measurements of these famous doctors who did great work. They had great data sets and added them up, and that's where I got these numbers from. They did it a long time ago, so they should be legit. And it's just amazing that it's a mirror. It's like God verified the previous relationship, but he put it in a different place. And whereas this one continues up to the king's chamber, the one at the bottom comes to a dead end when Jesus died. A dead end. And the pit of hell is near it. What's that saying? Likewise, this area that continues up, well, it also has they call it the well shaft. It's a region that descends. Like one could fall in it and just fall all the way down and end up in the subterranean level. And it's located at around the area where Jesus was crucified, the date that represents that. And likewise, in the book of Daniel 9, chapter 9, around verse 27, it explains why there is this pit of hell relating to Jesus' death on the cross. And if you think about it, you can probably figure out why, because the Old Testament has many laws that there's only one God. One is not to use statues or images of God in worship. And those who do, they're cursed for 3 or 4 generations. And this concept that Jesus is God, a lot of it comes from the use of, well, it is, let's see, yeah, it's the concept of the Trinity and the belief that Jesus is another God or another person of God. There was a council among the Christian leaders, the political ones, and they decided that it's okay to use statues and images in the worship of God because, Jesus is part of a Trinity, which he's not. There's only one God. Jesus is not a second God to the one God. So the crucifix, the statue of Jesus on the cross that people, use in prayer and worship and perhaps bow down to, this this is wrong. This is outlawed by God in the Old Testament. And that's why there's this descending pit there where Jesus died on the cross. Some Christians will fall into that pit. And in fact, the majority of the sects in the Christian world, they have man-made doctrine that they added on to the Bible, which defines their sect. And usually all of them involve there being a trinity of three gods. So, or somehow there, Jesus is God also. So that's the great deception, and that's what this is pointed out. Now, as far as Daniel 9:27, around that area, the thing about Daniel 9 is it very clearly uses a prophecy that's grounded in historical record, that's provable. And the scholarly work is so well known and so trustworthy, it's called canon. It's called the Canon of Kings, written by Ptolemy. And he used this, he took all these dates of different kings in history and the astronomical events and tried to prove or reproduce eclipses. I think he was trying to prove the world was flat, but while that's obviously, ridiculous, today we know that he still did scholarly work in recording these great kings and their dates, and the Bible refers to those dates also, and that's how we can know what Daniel was prophesying. So you take this certain decree that Daniel talks about, and you go forward 490 years, and Daniel says that that's when the Messiah would put it into all sin. Well, that's 490 years from that date is when Jesus died on the cross in 34 AD. It all matches up with what we talked about earlier, as you see, 30 to 34 AD. So then Daniel breaks up the last 7 years, and in the middle of this, last 7 years before Jesus died on the cross, that's when the daily sacrifice ceased. In other words, the old covenant came to an end. That's when Jesus began his ministry. According to Luke 3:23, Jesus was 30 years old when he began his ministry. So then you have the 4 Passovers that Jesus celebrated, and his ministry lasted 4 years. So he was crucified 34 AD. So what does Daniel say about that area where Jesus died? First of all, he says the Messiah would put it into all sin. But when he repeats that time the second time, he talks about a person who makes a covenant for a week, or in other words, 7 years. And he talks about this desolation that's going to happen, and that, his followers are going to be desolated. And there's different ways to look at that, because the Hebrew word for desolated, it could be astonished or dumbfounded or stunned. It's related to miracles. When someone performs miracles, they're just amazed and stunned and stupefied. So in a way, it could be translated as that, they witnessed these miracles of Jesus and they were stunned. But also it could be translated as desolated, which is if a army desolates a city, they level it to the ground. So this use of the crucifix desolated those who actually practice that and believe that Jesus is God apart from the one true God, or part of a trinity of gods. That's a desolation. As the Old Testament says, that's a curse. To use statues and images is a curse. To worship more than one God is a curse. So that's what the Ten Commandments, a lot of it was all about the oneness of God in the Old Covenant. So that's what that's showing. That's why that's there. And from that point, you have this horizontal passage. And let's see, it leads to the the Queen's Chamber, it's called. Um, Muhammad was a man, but I read somewhere that he was effeminate. Um, I I don't like repeating that. I don't know if it's true or not. It doesn't really matter to me either way. But for whatever reason, like in many pyramids where they have two chambers, like the smaller one is referred to as the queen's chamber. They would keep the queen in there, and the bigger one would be the king's chamber. But I don't know if this is related to that at all. I mean, that's just like a term that they use. So it has a stepping down. As you can see, it's pretty big, but here it's kind of small. And it leads to this very symmetrical room, the Queen's Chamber. And the air shaft is coming from one wall of it. So let's see. If you go from the end of the Queen's Chamber, like look at the left, the very left, and you go draw a line to the beginning of the Grand Gallery, you get a certain measurement. You divide that by 3, and that's when Muhammad began his ministry. That's pretty amazing. But also, within the Queen's Chamber, there is a structure in the wall that can be found in Muslim mosques all over the world. Here's a representation of it. It's called the niche. It's like if someone dug into the wall and created like an indentation or a hole. That's what the niche is. It's this some sort of like area of void within the wall where space is just space. And it has the shape you see here. It has these square-like shapes at the top. So this is the exact same structure that's reproduced in most Muslim mosques. Here you see those doctors I was telling you about. One of them sitting in the niche. Someone dug a hole into the lower portion of the niche looking for some sort of treasure. And the rubble's still there in this picture. So nowadays, this niche isn't perfectly flat, but has a little hole area at the bottom. Well, in many of the Muslim mosques, there's also a hole area, a further area at the lower section. Sometimes they put the Quran in there. Here's one. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at the area at the top, how it has the steps. That's so beautiful. Again, you have the step area, the step-like designs at the top, straight up and down on the sides. Look at that one. Oh my god, that's so gorgeous. Wow. Notice there are no pictures. They don't have icons in Islam. They make beautiful words with their calligraphy and text. Like usually they're names of God or praises to God. But again, you have these blocky structures at the top. And it's a hole in the wall, basically like an indention, like in the Queen's Chamber. Yeah, but that's just half of it. The other half is most Muslim mosques, they have these stairs, the minbar. And they're similar to the stairs of the Great Pyramid. And sometimes the niche or the niche into the wall, it's near the stairs. Look at that. And so, like, I think Muhammad originally had like a stair with 3 steps, like that one on the right. And the Muslims ascend these stairs and go to the top and then praise God from it. very beautiful, the symbology. And obviously, the Great Pyramid of Egypt, you see how they're right next to each other. The Great Pyramid of Egypt, the Grand Gallery, today have stairs in it. They have been added to it. But originally, it was just a ramp. And there is prophecy. There's like law in the Old Testament that the inclined area leading up to the altar in the temple, it can't have steps. So it was originally a ramp. They didn't want people seeing the genitals of the priests when they were going up to make their sacrifices. Um, so it has been this great step here, as it's called. It has been likened to an altar. Again, the Isaiah prophecy about an altar to the Lord. And perhaps that's what it represents. But at the bottom corner is the year 1844 AD, when the Bob began his ministry, fulfilling many prophecies. Many prophecies. Some of the prophecies in the Bible state that a third of mankind will be slain. And then it points to that year. A third of the Bob's followers were martyred. That's a well-known historical figure, being like 20,000 for one period. Another period was 10,000. And let's see. The entrance to the King's Chamber is 1863, and that's taking 19 pyramidages to a year between 1844 and from there onward. The like I said, the Queen's Chamber is a giant arrow pointing to the face of the Great Step. This is taking the outer steps of the Great Pyramid and showing how they align with the inner structures within the Great Pyramid. The floor of the Queen's Chamber, if you draw an imaginary line and extend it, let's see, just want to show that. Extend it into the ascending passage, and you make another imaginary line at the entrance of the Grand Gallery. You can create a triangle. This is what the Christian scholars have done. They call it Christ's triangle. The value, the largest line there is 34. Jesus died when he was 33 years old in 34 AD. Here's a picture of that lesser great step leading to the Queen's Chamber. Look how perfect the walls and the ceilings are. So massive, yet so perfectly flat and angled. It's truly amazing. So here's another depiction of the Christ triangle that I made. Well, I made this one. Let's see. The bottom line is 30.5 feet long. Jesus began his ministry in 30.5 AD. So we're in the middle of it, 30 AD. That's amazing. You have when Jesus began his ministry and when he died on the cross, mirrored here yet again, because we know it's mirrored at the entrance to the Grand Gallery, and it's mirrored at the end of the subterranean level. this relationship, these two numbers. They're so important. What else? Well, if you look at the angles within the triangle, um, there's a 90-degree angle at the bottom left, and that means it's the right angle. To me, that represents righteousness and being right, straight up and down, blessed. But it's possible that the number 90 will show up in prophecy one day, or it's already occurred. I don't know. Let's see. The rightmost angle is, it's either 26 or 27, probably 27, or maybe 26 and a fraction. So Jesus was 26 years old when he began his ministry. That is, he began his ministry, let's see, no, not when he began his ministry. That's when he was baptized in the River Jordan, according to Haley's Bible Handbook. He may have been a year off because of the 0 year issue. There is no 0 year on the Gregorian calendar. It goes from 1 BC to 1 AD. So a lot of scholars who tried to figure this stuff out, like initially, they were off a year. But if you correct it, even this Bible scholar Haley, who wrote Haley's Bible Handbook like over 95 years ago, a well-known source, a scholarly source, and a well-known scholar, he calculated this event and labeled it when Jesus was baptized in the River Jordan to be 26 AD, but with it corrected, that would be 27 AD. So, wow, that's amazing. Well, the other angle at the top is, what's amazing about it is, the measurement is like 26 and a fraction, but like they're different measurements were taken, and 27 can also be used. It's a little fuzzy, like so many measurements. So the measurement at the top is like 63 degrees. That's when Baha'u'llah began his ministry in 1863. So you have 1863 and 27 when Jesus was baptized. Maybe that's when he began his private ministry. I don't know. It's possible. But it doesn't state that. It's just like a guess. But at the top, 63 is definitely when Baha'u'llah began his private ministry. And as far as 90 goes, who knows? You had 34, when Jesus died on the cross, 30 and a half when Jesus began his ministry, and 14.9, another unknown. There's the value 25. It shows up a lot before you get to the well shaft of all places. So the Earth spins around an axis that's tilted. That tilt, it rotates very slowly. And in approximately 25,000 years, it makes a full rotation. This rotation actually speeds up and slows down in very great, grand, enormous cycles. So the exact moment when the great year, or when it will complete a revolution in 27 years, that central epoch of that would be 1844 AD. I know that's a lot, like, if you don't know, like, all the science about a great year. But it's like you have a graph, and, there's an X and a Y, and when the value is 25,827 years, that's 1844 AD on the other axis. So it's just like a big arrow pointing to the year when, the Bob began his ministry. The time of the end. Again, this is the same number that so many Bible prophecies point to. So this number 25827, the Christian scholars they believe that it's recorded different ways in the Great Pyramid. That is, let's see if this is one of them. Something about making a circle. I'm not going to get into that. I don't really remember what that was, but it's like at the level of the floor of the king's chamber, or slightly above it, where the contents of the let's see, the Ark of the Covenant, where that would be. Um, if you make a perfect circle at that area, like to the outside of the pyramid, um, the circumference of it would be that value, 25,827. In other words, the one that points to 1844. So that's one way that's pointed to. It's something like that. It's been a while since I looked at it, like I said. But the other one is that you take the longest lines in the whole pyramid, the two diagonals at the base, you add those together and you get 25,827, according to Smith in his work, which admittedly is it could be seen as sketchy how he arrived at it by averaging many different measurements. But it is fascinating that he did arrive at that number. And let's see, there is a certain way of determining like how long a great year would last when it had a central year of the epoch of the great year. Um, and one of the first initial ones is what's used to determine the value of 1844 AD when that was discovered for the first time. And I will give power to my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. So that's 1260. Huh. Clothed in sackcloth. So, these values that show when Jesus began his ministry at the location of the entrance to the Great Gallery in 1844 AD at the base of the Great Step, I arrived at them using the figures below. However, later I found that one can also arrive at these values simply by using the measurements that Smith alone took. So it's not necessary to use Petrie's measurements at all, but one has to have all of Smith's books and use them. That took a while for me to get. I never put that down as a picture or anything, but I did do the calculations later. Although in this early version, which you're looking at, I used both. Like, obviously I didn't discover all of these relationships and the pyramid timeline and chronology and the various mathematical wonders and values that, and scientific values that are recorded in the Great Pyramid. Others have paved the way and discovered this before me. So, I make no claims to that. I'm the founder of any of this. I'm a lot of this I'm verifying. I verified for myself, and I'm sharing what I found. You can verify it for yourself too. Using these values are recorded in Smith and Petrie's book, but all you really need is Smith's book. Yeah. The problem with using Petrie's book also is at some points some measurements are a few inches off. So that could be a real problem. But there's more. There's a lot more to this. So when you use all of Smith's books, you'll see that the timeline really is accurate, just using Smith's numbers alone. So let's see. You have all these letters. They represent dates, and you have the terminology used by Smith and Petrie: the well, the grotto, the pit, antechamber, all these different things. And then you have where in the Great Pyramid these terms can be referred to. Okay, so it's interesting to note that Alexander Graham Bell also he sent a message over Morse code over long distances from Baltimore, Maryland to Washington D.C., saying what if God wrought at the time that the Bob began his ministry in the same year, 1844. That's basically the prehistoric birth of the internet. This is a term that for this year that has been coined by another scholar. Many things happened at that year. Many amazing discoveries. But the internet, if you look at a map of it, it reminds me of a map of the cellular network of the brain. Well, from that first message sent by Alexander Graham Bell on the telegraph, the history of invention just skyrocketed. It boomed from there. It was like the literal beginning of a new age. A new age, indeed. That's when cheap books started being manufactured for the first time due to a new technology. Cheap newspapers, cheap paper. And throughout time, information just exploded more and more. It's like exponentially. It was amazing, all the things that were discovered around that time, and it just kept on getting snowballing from there. I mean, before 1844 AD, it was like horse and buggy and plow and medieval stuff for a lot of people. But after that time, things really started to change. Dispensation in the incomparable beclouded point, and made the hidden mount to revolve about the firmament of the theophany, the concealed self, the focal center of eternality. He caused the lordly point to circle round the most splendid, all-enduring ornament. That's from the Tablet of All Food by Baha'u'llah, translated by Stephen Lambden. So he caused the lordly point to circle round the most splendid, all-enduring ornament. This term ornament is important. It's mentioned in the Bible, and there is a feature in the Great Pyramid called the ornament. And there it is. This is the antechamber, the room that leads to the king's chamber. In the middle of it, you can see there's a granite leaf from one side of the wall to the other. And on this granite leaf at the top part is an embossment, or it can be seen as a carving. it's referred to as the Boss by Smith and Petrie. And here I date the different areas that are in this picture. Showing 1863 is the beginning of the King's Chamber. This is taking a pyramidage for 19 years, or vice versa. Let's see, 19 pyramidages for a year. Yeah. And here the Boss is painted red at the top left. And this is the year that Bob died, 1850 AD. He was martyred 1266 AH on the Muslim calendar. And it's located in the region of the little entrance gate area. From 1844 to 1846, along the face of the Great Step, that's the period when the new religion increased in numbers very rapidly, the most. The region along this craggy wall of the Grand Gallery, that's when Baha'u'llah was in the crags of these great prisons high in the mountains, perhaps Sharik, it may be called. Powerful symbology. Whom do you claim to be? And what is the message which you have brought? I am, the promised one. I am the one whose name you have for 1,000 years invoked, at whose mention you have risen, whose advent you have longed to witness, in the hour of whose revelation you have prayed God to hasten. Verily, truly, I say, it is incumbent upon the peoples of both the East and the West to obey my word and to pledge allegiance to my person, replied the Bab. A divine, or a cleric, shamefully replied, You wretched and immature lad of Shiraz, you have already convulsed and subverted Iraq. Do you now wish to arouse a like turmoil in Iran? Your honor, replied the Bab, I have not come hither of my own accord. I have been summoned to this place. Hold your peace, you perverse and contemptible follower of Satan, was the retort. Your honor, I maintain what I have already declared, responded the Bab. Then Nizamul Ulama said, The claim which you have advanced is a stupendous one. It must needs be supported by the most incontrovertible evidence. The mightiest, the most convincing evidence of the truth of the mission of the Prophet of God is admittedly his own word. He himself testifies to this truth. Is it not enough for them that we have sent down to thee the book, the Quran? The power to produce such evidence has been given to me by God. Within the space of 2 days and 2 nights, I declare myself able to reveal verses of such number as will equal the whole of the Quran, said the Bab. So that continues on. About that, I actually have the very accurate numbers here. Hopefully they're still accurate. Time seems to have effects on things. This has been here for a while. Hopefully I haven't edited it. But the base of the Boss appears to be 1853. Yeah, the tip of it sticks out an inch. Huh. That's odd. Yeah, obviously, it doesn't match up with what I recall. So I don't know, maybe it's different. No. Yeah, because you have to divide by 19. So 0.1 times 19 is 1.9. Okay, so that doesn't sound like it's too off. Yeah, the face of the leaf. The leaf is probably about like 17 inches or something thick. So it looks pretty accurate. And interesting, it's interesting that at the end of the King's Chamber you have the date 1874. I'm not sure what happened there or what that represents. So these are the values recorded at the base of the Great Pyramid in the book below. They're basically 500 cubits square. The Bible records that the temple was also 500 cubits square. So there's a match. That's pretty significant. What does the temple, that is King Solomon's temple, why is that correlated to the Great Pyramid like that? The mighty God, the Lord of hosts, is his name. Great in counsel and mighty in work, for thine eyes are open upon all the ways of the sons of men, to give every one according to his ways, and according to the fruit of his doings, which hast set signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, even unto this day. Jeremiah 32:20. So this great mighty God has set signs and wonders, that has to do with miracles, wonders, in the land of Egypt, even unto this day. So, like, what signs and wonders is this talking about? Which Jeremiah is telling us, this great prophet, and that's in Egypt. So, it's in there even unto this day. So that's the day of Jeremiah. He's not talking about the day of Pharaoh. That's a completely different time period. It's the Great Pyramid of Egypt that was around back then. It is a great wonder. It's the heaviest building in the world, and it still stands. It's an amazing sign to God. A sign that God has made. It's amazing. It's just profound. You know, one day I was meditating. I'm thinking, how am I going to figure out the covenant? I can read the Bible. I can read the Quran. I can read the sacred texts. Bhagavad Gita maybe. But I just meditated. I prayed to God, and what came to me was, God. God is all knowing. God is great. He probably put the information in the biggest, heaviest, most powerful building on the planet. So all I have to do is figure out what the biggest building on the planet is, and that'll be the answer. So that's when I started doing the pyramid research, and it blew me away. It still blows me away. And so I'm just sharing what I found. Wow, that came to me. That actually came to me. I was praying to God, meditating, and I wanted answers. Because whew, I wanted proof. I wanted to really know the nitty gritty, and why, so many Christians, they just reject the Bab and Muhammad and Baha'u'llah. It's flat out right. And what's going on? And it's all in the Great Pyramid. It's all about the great and mighty God, the Lord of hosts, is his name. Whew. So the word Bab, it means gate. And the Bab came to prepare the people for the coming of the promised one, who'd come shortly. So let's see what this says. He's like a John the Baptist figure. John the Baptist came to cleanse the people and make them ready for Jesus Christ. So the Bab had the same relationship for the next promised one. The Bab had made references alluding to two dates of the appearance of the Promised One, well, at least two, anyways. The first involved the word Baha, which translates to glory, and has a numerical value of 9. And this reference has showed that the hidden aspect of the Most Great Name, or He whom God shall make manifest, that's what the Bab called him, He whom God shall make manifest, would appear in the year 1853. This is the year that lines up with the bus. What? 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 Wow. 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 I forgot that. I wrote that. The other reference involved the word Vahid, which means the one. The one. It has a numerical value of 19, and the Bab showed that the manifest aspect of the one, who God will make manifest, would appear in the year 1863 AD. This is exactly what happened. 1863 AD corresponds to the entrance of the king's chamber. This is I love this story. I highly recommend everyone read the Dawnbreakers. It's so interesting. Let's see what this okay, so in 1853 AD, the area that the boss lines up with, Baha'u'llah's station was revealed in a hidden manner when he revealed the tablet of all food. At that time, a pilgrim had traveled to Iraq to meet Azal. Azal was like he was a figurehead of the Bab's religion in name only. He had the name of being the leader of the Bab's religion, but it was really Baha'u'llah. So this guy, he traveled all the way to Iraq to meet Azal, and he asked him to explain the meaning of the verse in the Quran that states, all food was lawful to the children of Israel, save what Israel made unlawful to himself before the Torah was sent down. When the pilgrim read Azal's commentary, he was unimpressed, so he sought the commentary's meaning from Baha'u'llah. After reading Baha'u'llah's commentary, the pilgrim became a devoted admirer and immediately pledged his allegiance. News of this event spread, and many Babis questioned what Baha'u'llah's true station was. He never sought power and prestige. He was born into a wealthy and prominent family. Some scholars believe his family was the wealthiest in the world at that time. But he gave nearly all of his riches to the poor and needy. He became known as the father of the poor. His intention was the exaltation of mankind. Due to the fame of this particular incident, Baha'u'llah's reputation grew in esteem, and Azal became jealous. Azal organized a campaign against Baha'u'llah. Therefore, he left the community and retreated into a cave in the mountains far from society. Okay. The superiority of the spirit of his words stand on its own as the ultimate proof of his reality, as the Bab prophesied. The hidden aspect of Baha was revealed in 1853 with the revelation of this tablet, whose opening phrase revolving around the most splendid, all-enduring ornament. Wow! The opening phrase of this tablet revealed in 1853 that proved his station to the believers. Like the first line was it involved the most splendid, all-enduring ornament. This opening phrase. Wow. It is fitting to point out that the date where the boss, the embodiment of the standard of measure, the sacred inch, the sacred standard, correlates to 1853 AD, is the date when God's sacred standard, the revealed scripture, was used to test and prove Baha'u'llah's station. Quote, we measured the boss and found it just out from its stone 1 inch, and also to be removed from the center of the breadth of its stone exactly 1 inch. Measurements which corroborate former measurements. Dr. J.S. Grant, 1874, The Great Pyramid of Giza by Louis P. McCarty. So yeah, this ornament sticks out an inch, and it has another aspect of an inch to it, and it's basically a unit of measurement. It's like the previous Bible verse: establish judgment in the gate, establish the measure in the gate, something like that. You're putting the measurement standard in the gate, the gateway. And it's like a gateway where it's located, but it's also the very interesting. The Great Pyramid has its own measurement thing with the alignment of the stars. So it's written, it is the shape of a half moon. It has been carefully formed by the workman's chisel. It is exactly 1 pyramid inch thick and 5 pyramid inches broad. These are ground elements of measurement throughout the whole vast structure. It symbolizes a deed, rule, measure. In entering it, the antechamber, all are confronted by this granite moveless standard on which are stamped the units of measure, the inch, and the cubit. Great Pyramid, the 1882 Ford. Establish judgment in the gate. Amos 5:8. Establish judgment in the gate. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. Like a tape measure, a linen cord, and a measuring rod like a ruler in his hand. He was standing in the gateway. Now let's look at this. It's like the gateway. The whole room is like the gate to the king's chamber. And this little area where the Bob was martyred, that's like the gateway to the antechamber. It's like there's the measure right there for all the witness. It's just amazing. It's profound. Look at how one would have to stoop to enter the antechamber. Then one could stand up and look at it. And God like placed it so that they'd have to look up to it. Or whoever, the designer of this was. This apparently was very divinely inspired. So it's shaped, here's a picture of it, shaped like a rainbow to me. I see it as a rainbow, perhaps. Another person said a moon. Who knows? But the chest that's in it, in the king's chamber, it has mathematical proportions related to the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies in the temple. So this whole room has mathematical proportion ratios and relationships to the Holy of Holies. I mean, this is all so holy. It's just impossible for it to be coincidence, the way that many of the dimensions are correlated in volume or in other ways. And again, you have this rainbow or whatever this is supposed to represent, shape there. And it's also at the very top of the granite leaf, which it's on. You have that kind of shape there. So this lets you see how massive and enormous the Great Step really is. You really have to climb up it. Here's some sources. If anyone wants to verify any of this. It's all sourced. There's a prophecy in the book of Amos. Let's see. It's about the sinful kingdom being destroyed and going forward a certain amount of years, and that's when the new wine will flow from the mountains, or the sweet wine. So one sinful kingdom that was destroyed was Judah. Now it was first destroyed in 677 BC, and its king, King Manasseh, was kidnapped. So that's when it was first conquered anyways. Now, that was like the events that took place then, that was the seed of the destruction of Judah later, 70 years later. Because the abomination that makes desolate was put in the holy place by King Manasseh, and the first punishment was predicted to happen after that event in Leviticus 26. But yeah, it's recorded in Jewish tradition and in various sources, which I go into in my other videos. That happened in 677 BC. That the punishments began, the kidnapping began. So let's see. You go forward 700 years. Yeah, that's the other part of the Leviticus prophecy. You go forward 7 times. Well, 700 years, 7 times 100, and you get 34 AD. And 100 is important because Isaac was born when Abraham was 100 years old. I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. Will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. And it just keeps repeating. 7 times. So here's another 7 times. 7 times 180. 7 times 180 plus a month. So that's the value 1290. That's what Jesus referred to about when he will return. So you can take that same anchor date and go forward 1290. And you get when Muhammad began his ministry. That's at the last wall of the Queen's Chamber. Isaac lived 180 years. That's when he died, when he was 180 years old. So you have this relationship between Ishmael and Isaac, and Muhammad's the descendant of Isaac's brother. So it's 7 times 180 plus a month. Because, in Islam you have the sun and the moon, the star and the moon. You have to have the month there too. So there's this symbol. It's when he began his ministry. Let's see, 7 times is 20 years later. It's when the Bab began his ministry in 1844 AD. It says, observe my Sabbaths in Leviticus 26, 2. Observe, look at the 7th time, the 7th day, 1844 AD. That's what it's all about. So here's a bullhorn with a gate on it, a door. Here's a bullhorn with the Islam symbol. And this is when Baha'u'llah began his ministry. Baha'u'llah began his ministry in 1863 AD, 20 years later, plus 19. So that's plus the Baha'i month. The former and latter rain, the first month. That's where that month added on to it comes from. So Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah were redeemers. And that's what Leviticus 26 is about. It's in between stuff talking about redemption. And we have chances of redemption, like in history. We have periods where we can be redeemed or we can continue breaking the covenant. That's the option that mankind is given. And these were the promised redeemers. So that's the sinful kingdom of Judah. The sinful kingdom of Israel, well, that's the main one. That happened in 721 BC. And from there, let's see what the prophecy says in Amos 9. Israel, the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it. All right. Obviously, it's skipping some things. Jesus born in 1 BC, 720, or 2 times later. 2 times. It says days. The plural of day is 2 days. So that's 2 times. The Hebrew word yom, it could mean a day, it could mean a year, it could mean a time. A time is 360 days or 360 years. So 2 times would be 720 years later. That's when Jesus was born in 1 BC, according to our calendar. So I have a picture of some sort of cradle with a blanket. Okay, there's a crib. So you have, from this anchor date, you have when Jesus was born, when Muhammad was born, when Muhammad began his ministry, and when the Bab was born. From the same anchor date. One is plus 1290. What Jesus referred to that about his return in Matthew 24 in Daniel. You have 615. That's the 1335 number at the end of Daniel. And Jesus referred to that about when he'd return. And you have 1819 AD, when the Bob was born. That's miraculous. All these births from the same anchor date, and these are the promised ones. So that's 25, 20 years plus 19. You got to have that moon in there. 7 times and a body month. The Bob made his own calendar. It's composed of let's see. The Bob's calendars has 19 months. Each month is composed of 19 days. And here you see the names of the months. Who knew? Look at these lovely names. So each name has to do with something about God. But the value 19, as it says at the end, it means one, oneness, unity. It's about the promised one. And the reason 19 shows up so much in this calendar is because the whole goal of life is to discover who the promised one is for the day and age in which one lives. Who is the promised one of today? That is the ultimate goal of life, of creation, to find the promised one and to know who he is and believe in him. And in John, when Jesus was asked what the greatest thing one could do, the greatest work one could do, his reply was, it's to believe in the one whom God has sent. To believe in the promised one. So to be in sin is to miss the bullseye, is to not know who the promised one is and not believe in him. And Jesus put an end to all sin. He put an end to all sin when he died on the cross in 34 AD. So this is how Jesus put an end to all sin. He gave prophecies about when he would return. And basically the 3-day prophecy, destroy the temple, in 3 days it'll be rebuilt. The temple of Jesus' body was destroyed in 34 AD. So this is a mathematical formula, 34 AD plus 3x equals y. And he was 33 years old when he died on the cross. So it's 30, from the beginning of the calendar, is 33 plus 3x equals y. The other prophecy he gave about when he returned, Matthew 24, he referred to Daniel. And the end of Daniel where it talks about the abomination makes desolate. So the formula that comes out of that is x plus 1290 equals y. That's why that number is so important. It's repeated twice in the Great Pyramid chronology. So you do the math, you can solve for when Jesus will return and when the end of the age will be. Those are the 2 questions posed to Jesus in Matthew 24. And it's simple math. But you got to know some things. You have to subtract 1 because of that lack of a 0 year from 34 AD. So you're actually calculating for the beginning of the calendar to when Jesus died. That's 33 years later. And then you can do the math and so that's one value, x, and the other one is you solve for y. And then you got to convert it back to the AD-BC system, so you add 1. And the final value is 1919 AD and 629 AD. Well, Jesus didn't return at these times, did he? You got to think about that. So, solve this on your own and see what numbers you get. Using 34 AD or 33 and 69 and 1290 solar years, or solve it also for lunar years, 1290 lunar years, because the original Jewish calendar was the lunar calendar that used lunar years, and it was a Jew who gave these prophecies. Daniel, he was a Jew. So that's 1252 to 1253 years on our calendar, solar years. And you figure out the results. You will see that, well, okay, the reason why 70 is used, because that's when the literal temple was destroyed. And we know why 34 AD was used by now. I mean, that's obvious Jesus died at that time. So we can solve this, and you'll see the answers are very clear. Jesus returned at those times. The dates for Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah are all given when you solve this equation. What you have here is you have like a line on a graph like that. Another line is like that. It's steep, 3-to-1 ratio, and they intersect, and that's what you're solving for. Where they intersect, that's where Jesus will return, and the values you get are those dates we've been seeing over and over in the Great Pyramid. It's just miraculous. Like one is the X value, and the other one's the Y value. So, if Jesus had died at any other time in history, we wouldn't have all those dates for when Muhammad began his ministry, when the Bab began his ministry, when Baha'u'llah began his ministry. Those dates wouldn't be outputted as a result of this function. So the one constant you got to put in here is when Jesus died on the cross, and also the other one is 70 A.D. Everyone knows the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D. So that's how Jesus put it into all sin. Because the greatest sin is to not believe in the promised one, to miss the boat, miss the bullseye. And by dying on the cross at that exact time, now we all have the answer that, you know, Jesus' death on the cross is telling the world Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah are all from God, and they were the promised ones that came in that year. It's it's so that we can all be freed from the sin of not believing in the promised one of the day in which we live. That's the ultimate sin. So, whew, that's how Jesus put it into all sin. It's not about him being born without sperm involved. Um, the reason why this concept of that he was born of a virgin, the reason why that is in the Bible is it's prophecy. It was prophesied that Jesus would be born of a virgin and his name would be Emmanuel. And it's we know when I went to sex education class in high school, they told us if you get your semen anywhere near a woman's vagina, she could get pregnant, whether she has a hymen or not. And that's well known. So this idea of her being born of a virgin doesn't mean that sperm wasn't involved. And that's what the Great Pyramid prophecy points out. It points to the testicles of Orion and then his penis. So in order for Jesus to be the Messiah, Messiah ben David, that's the full title, that's the anointed descendant of King David, he would have to be created from the descendant of King David's sperm. His father Joseph was a descendant of King David. It's written down and recorded in the Bible. This great lineage going all the way to King David. So the miracle is that Jesus was born from a woman who was never penetrated. She was a virgin. The miracle isn't that he was created without sperm involved. And why does this matter? Well, it's the corruption in Christianity is based on the idea that Jesus was born without sperm, that God Almighty, creator of all, who cannot be seen or felt or known or experienced directly, but you have to have this great person like Moses or Jesus or Muhammad to reveal his teachings. We can't see him with our own eyes. We'd probably burn up if we tried. The closest we can come is to see someone like Jesus. So the idea that Almighty God, invisible God, the creator of all things, um, had sex with Joseph's wife, or whatever their relationship was, and impregnated her, and then created another god, a baby god, and so now there were two gods, and somehow Mary got thrown into it. It it's absurd. It's not biblical, and there's much scripture supporting the fact that Jesus had a fleshly father, and he was born of that father. And for those who choose to look at the scripture, they'll see that. Like the interpretation that Jesus is the second God and he was born without sperm is evil. That's Antichrist. The word anti means against, and the word Christ is the word Christ is, it means the same thing as Messiah. Messiah ben David, a sperm descendant from King David, from the kingly line. So those who don't believe that Jesus Christ was created from the sperm of Joseph, who was descended from King David, they're Antichrist. They're following the teachings of Antichrist. And if you look up the word Antichrist in the Bible, you'll see that the Antichrist belief was around even just a few years after Jesus' death. It's not some guy is going to come in the temple and that's a misinterpretation. They have a lot of misinterpretations in the Bible. The abomination that makes desolate is put in the holy place. That's not about the Antichrist. That's what King Manasseh did in 677 BC or near that date. It's recorded in the Bible. He put an idol, an abomination, in the holy place, in the temple. And then you go forward 1290 years, that number Jesus pointed to, and that's Muhammad. So that's why it points to what it points to. I mean, it's one of the pivotal things at the entrance to the Great Pyramid. If you want to understand the Great Pyramid prophecies, you have to see this connection. It's one of the foremost connections in the heaven of prophecy involving the Great Pyramid. The foremost thing to understand is that you have this man with a bow in his hand, a symbol of the covenant, the rainbow. The bow in the clouds, the bow in the sky. And he has a red sash. The high priest wore the red sash. So here it's depicted hanging from some sort of skirt. But it says the high priest wearing the sacred vestments. The ends of the abnet are shown in red hanging at his feet. So that's shown in this Orion constellation too, this red sash. So here's the Orion constellation, taken by NASA, apparently. You see the Barnard's Loop, the red sash? The head stands out, it's very round. The nebula is labeled here. Betelgeuse is the red shoulder. Again, there's that red shoulder. The shoulder is emphasized, like the shoulder of the bull with Alnitak. No, that's Alcyone. And here you can see some sort of hair, like blowing in the wind. You can see how the red sash is worn over his body. And it even looks like he has some sort of sacrificial dagger for the sacrifices on the altar to remove the sin of the Jews. There is a very clear bow. You can almost see the bow here. It's just amazing. Looks like it's tilted a little bit. Here, there looks like a bow that's just from one side to another, almost to his feet, in a way. But there is a bow that stands out very clearly in the Orion constellation. There we are. So, that's covenant material. The bow, the sash, it's all sacred. And if you hold his arm out anatomically proportioned to a human body, that's where the bow would be. And if you hold the other arm out and he's holding out a CD-ROM in his right hand, there is some sort of disc there. You see the disc? You could zoom into that in other pictures, and you'll see that there's. It looks like a figure is standing up and holding out a disc at the right hand of this covenant symbol that's pointed to in this witness to the Lord in prophecy. So again, you have the highlighted shoulder, and above that is what looks like the 3 stars of Orion. This has been noted by other people. They found this in a crop circle. And you have someone holding out a CD-ROM again, this theme of holding out knowledge, presenting knowledge like the Great Pyramid. And this CD-ROM has been decoded in ANSI code, and it actually has a message on it. You also have the one eye. These themes keep repeating in certain images. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe. Believe. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. And it may end with a comma or a beep or a period here. There is, in the letters B and E next to each other, there's some sort of like underlined dot. You'd have to see it for yourself. The story of these crop circles is fascinating. This one in particular, the one on the left, I believe it was Arthur C. Clarke who sent out a very simple like binary code message, perhaps through a radio telescope into outer space, giving all this information about humans, including our basic building blocks, the elements we're composed of, and our DNA and various things. And what was sent back was, well, they found a crop circle of apparently some sort of alien type human race that had slightly different DNA, like a third strand, and the telescope that it was sent with looks a little different, and the shape of the humanoid looks different, with a bigger head, bigger eyes, and let's see what else. Oh, it was composed of an extra element, silicon. So, silicon is a fascinating element because if you grow your own food, using biological methods, not chemicals, you can make it very, very healthy and have an abundance of vitamins. And if you get it extremely, extremely healthy, at one point it's resistant to sucking insects, at another point it's resistant to biting insects. But then if it keeps getting healthier and healthier, it attracts mammals. So that's what the top level, it attracts mammals to eat it. But there may be a level even higher than that, where the food that you grow actually puts out a glass-like sheen on its leaves and can defend itself against even mammals. And what is that element? That's silica, sand, silica, the other element that composes this alien race. So who wouldn't want to grow their own food and make it as healthy and vitamin rich as possible, and perhaps discover, perhaps evolve to another level? Who knows? But I think the real key to evolution is believing in the covenant of the time in which one lives. I mean, that's really what it's about. This ascending, rising up. This process of rising up is much more than merely elevating physically. So, as far as how one grows very healthy food, um, there's a Brix meter that's used to scientifically assay the nutrition content of food, and one can measure it with that. And methods have been found that increase food's health. If a food gets strong enough, it can have a immune system. The plant will have an immune system and defend itself against various pests. So the need for chemicals is unnecessary. Uh, Most of the food grown today is with chemicals and pesticides, which become unnecessary when the food is strong enough, when the crop is strong enough. Food that is healthy actually tastes better. It grows bigger, it stores longer, it can withstand frost. So there is there has been discovered a very extremely cheap way to enhance the nutrition quality of one's crops and food by giving it a lot of space. And there's a whole system to it. It's called the system of crop intensification or system of rice intensification. And another way is by adding lots of um, healthy microorganisms to the soil um, through inoculation and Korean natural farming and such techniques. But another way is also to provide all the minerals through taking seawater, removing the salt, and putting those elements that are in the seawater into the soil, which people do. There's many ways to increase the nutrition content of food, but who's doing it? And the system of crop intensification is just amazing. Farmers have increased their yield like possibly sevenfold without any extra chemicals. Um, and in fact, using chemical fertilizers, it kills the nutrients and the bacteria in the soil that one needs, that the plant needs to be very strong and healthy and nutrient producing. So it's counterproductive to add nitrogen, chemical nitrogen to the soil. It kills the earthworms. A very, very tiny bit of nitrogen, chemical nitrogen, just massively kills earthworms. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've found that to be very true. And but there are just a few elements that are very cheap. You add it to your soil, and the soil can make its own nitrogen from the air and fix it into the plants, and inoculation and various things. Um, it's all, to me. I find it just fascinating. Let food be thy medicine, not chemicals. Everybody could be growing food, healthy food. We don't need all the fertilizers and chemicals and chemical pesticides are necessary when the crops are nutrient deficient. And they're not necessary when the crops have a robust immune system. So these are some of the teachings, anyways, of some of the natural farmers that I've been watching. I have yet to try it out, but boy, I wish I could. Maybe someday I will try it out to a greater degree. Is this a forgery? Is it a real copy from a real cave painting or rock drawing, as they call it in Sputnik magazine, where this was first published? Who knows? Who could say? But what it shows, I see interesting correlations to it, especially with him holding out a CD-ROM, the angel wing on the shoulder, the pyramidal-shaped mountains, as others have pointed out, the phallus symbol behind the CD-ROM, the flying serpent or snake, which Draco, the dragon, the constellation Draco pointed to in the Great Pyramid prophecy, may be related to, on the right side of the face. there seem to be some fascinating concepts in here that just somehow seem related. Or not. Might be a stretch. So, an image of Mars was taken, and they have like pyramidal shaped mountains on it. You see the red disk next to these mountains. They call it the city of Sidonia. And there's the Mars face that's right near it. You see the crater at the shoulder area stands out pretty well. You see where the, well, let's zoom in on that. You see where the CD-ROM there, somehow that's different than the other craters. It's just like a discoloration. It doesn't show any depth, any shadow. And that's where the city of Sidonia, the pyramidal areas are. You see the Mars face right there? Top right. There's more that you can't see. I don't see in any of these pictures. But again, you take the anatomical proportion of a human body, match it up with the height of the face, stretch out that arm all the way, and it's just barely holding on to that disc there. You can almost see like a little hand in the lower right hand corner grasping onto it. Almost. But there are some lines like towards the bottom that appear to be where the feet would be, that appear to be marked or etched. That's what I was looking for. But it seems to have other pictures now. Tholos, wonder what that is. So this pyramid appears to have 5 sides. How about that? The city of Art Bell, Sidonia. I'm not a big fan of him. So this is a topographic map of America. And if you look on the western region, you see what looks, to me, it looks like a woman. Where the Salt Lake, that blue dot, is her eye. And the ponytail is the Baja Peninsula. There's that word, Baja Glory. And the mountains kind of outline her face. And she has, like, there's a breast there at the bottom of the screen. And looks like she has some sort of hip at the bottom, at the far bottom of the screen. And if she's holding out, like, her arm, like, proportional to a human body, like, there's some sort of hand, like, at the far left. It's like some sort of hand is being held up there. In other pictures show it better, but there's, like, a disc next to her hand. That's what I see. Like, others may see things differently. I'm not saying that these things are actually there, but these are the images that I see when I look at this. So let's close this. Look at something else. So if you actually look at a larger zoomed out portion of this region, you can see that the bottom, at the very bottom of the image, there's like to me it looks like a fin, as if this isn't a woman but a mermaid. So the west of America looks like a mermaid to me. And she's holding out a disc. topographical maps of different places. I find it fascinating how things appear to look like other things. To me, this map here looks like some sort of either dragon or perhaps an eagle, whereas the head is the top right portion. It looks like it has horns, and it looks like it's eating something. It has like a little leg there in Florida, and the wings are like way up in Alaska and Canada. They even go into that icy region there, break up. It looks almost like an overstuffed chicken if you exclude Mexico. And it's just interesting that America, its symbol is the eagle. And when I look at the other great nations, the top ruling nations with nuclear weapons that have the most power in the world, they all appear to me to look like the animal they represent, that they're known to have a symbol for, except for China. To me, this map of China, of France, it looks like the head of a cheetah or a leopard or some kind of cat with a pointy ear sticking out and its mouth open, maybe its tongue kind of sticking out. A very pointed nose there. Other maps show this better, but Russia in history, at some points in time, it looks like a bear standing up, but turned 90 degrees, so it's a bear on his side. And something about its legs being real short, looked like how a bear's legs are short. And if it was like a bear, like where its mouth would be at the top left, like that's probably where Ukraine is and all those other rib countries that are being chewed on. It's like it's located in the place um, where the bear would chew on something. There's prophecy about such things. It's just I find it interesting that it's located right there, like where his mouth is. Let's see. Look at that one. That's even better. The bear on his side. So there you can see some of its surrounding areas and where they're located. These four nations, the lion, the leopard, the bear, the eagle, they're all like important in Bible prophecy. So the UK or the lion, you see Wales there, the country of Wales, that forms part of the UK, United Kingdom, and it's kind of shaped like a lion on its side also. Huh. The prophecy says that it's going to stand like a man, or somehow it's going to be like a man. Especially with the big legs at the bottom. That's how I see it. I see England, it kind of looks like a knight that's kneeling on the ground, and this lion's kind of at its rear end. You see the flag of Wales. It has the land, and it has a red dragon. Important symbols. It has the sky also, but it's white for some reason. In Bible prophecy, these symbols stand out. The king of the UK is the, I believe he's Welsh. He was the Prince of Wales, anyways. Now he's the king. So I'm interested in seeing how this plays out with the red dragon. So the buffalo is a sacred symbol to the Native Americans, and I see that the constellation or this figure on the left, I see it as a buffalo. I suppose other people can see it as other things, such as the bull in the Taurus constellation. It may be seen as a buffalo, uh, but a very sacred symbol to Native Americans, and I appreciate that it appears that God has honored the Native Americans and what they hold to be sacred by including the great buffaloes in both the Taurus at the entrance, the shoulder, and this picture here where Orion is holding out his arm proportionally, and that's the CD-ROM that this figure here is holding out. It looks like there's a figure. You see the arms holding out the CD-ROM and his feet at the bottom. Let's put it at the bottom. Can't do that. And let's see, he has an eye that's very well lit up, and he has a great big massive horn, and he has an erection, it looks like, as well. So what I like about this image is the flowing hair to the right of Orion on his head. I think that really makes it look grand and majestic. The meaning of Alnitak is the girdle, which means the belt, and it's a symbol of strength, might, and power. And the high priest wore a girdle as well. Alnitak is that star which symbolizes the Great Pyramid of Egypt and is in the belt of Orion. So I think it's useful to look up Strong's Bible Word Dictionary for the word father and all the things that refers to. It's much more than just one's biological father. You know, when Jesus said that God is the Father and He's the Son of God, and He also, the Bible talks about, you know, the Christians being the sons of God. So there's a relationship that is much more involved than simply a biological father to son relationship. It's worth looking into. It's useful. When I've tried to talk to Christians in the past about Muhammad and Baha'u'llah, they a common reply would be that, you know, these are just men, and Jesus was God and this or the Son of God, and these men died, whereas Jesus, when he died, he rose on the cross 3 literal days later. So, you know, these are the common arguments they use to prove that the other religions are, you know, false or they're not as important. And who can argue with that? Who can prove otherwise? Also, that Jesus is, he wasn't born from sperm. He was born from God. God, the all-knowing, invisible essence, impregnated Mary directly. And that's why, because sperm wasn't involved, you know, dirty sperm, that he is God. And the other ones were, you know, they were born from a physical father. So a lot of these concepts that are hindrances to the Christians for recognizing the reality of Muhammad as the return of Jesus Christ and Muhammad as a divine messenger, divine manifestation, and apostle, or recognizing the Bab and Baha'u'llah as divine manifestations. A lot of these hindrances spring from the belief that Jesus was born without sperm. And he was created without sperm, that is. that somehow that's sinless, and therefore he's the son of the one true divine visible essence, the God of all creation, and therefore you have like two versions of God, but he's really one God, but he's really like three persons. But um, they say it's a mystery, and a lot of the times the Christians will refer to parts of the Bible that very clearly predict or foretell of the coming of Jesus as Muhammad, with a name that means Muhammad. And when one really looks at the actual scripture of the Bible and the prophecies that Jesus gave and his teachings, one sees that, if one looks closely for themselves with a pure heart, one can see that a lot of the doctrine and dogma that has been added on to the teachings of Jesus did not come from Jesus. In fact, he taught the direct opposite of these beliefs that define what, name the sect, name the top sect: Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, all the different sects. They have these beliefs that are not, they're not biblical, they're not from Jesus, and they're a corruption. And how did these corruptions even get in there? Well, look at the Great Pyramid. It tells you, it has this descent. The descending passage points right to a snake, right to, well, look what happened in the Garden of Eden. You have this serpent beguiling and tricking Adam and Eve, so they were kicked out. Well, it's a serpent. It's that very subtle, yet seemingly very powerful force in the world, satanic, and very cruel, in my opinion. Very cruel. So it can be, anyways, and it seems like the whole Christian world, as far as what exists as Christianity today, is united in certain beliefs that Jesus is a part of a trinity of gods, and it's really one God, but three persons in one. And he was born without sperm, and that causes the whole Christian world to redefine the definition of Messiah. Although there are two definitions in Wikipedia, one's the Jewish definition, the other is Christian. And the Jewish definition shows that he's descended from King David. Messiah has to be descended from King David to be the Messiah. So just because all of the great Christian leaders in the world, the political Christian leaders of the world, have decided on a fantasy and a myth, doesn't make it so. They have all agreed this is how we're going to interpret the Bible. Well, they agreed wrong. They're humans. Humans can make mistakes. I can make mistakes. Anybody can make mistakes. Jesus, he was, his teachings were from God. So he was on a whole different level. And when he said something, it's flawless. It's powerful. But these elected leaders of Christianity throughout time and throughout the different regions of the world, who people call patriarch or pope or father, they're humans. They can make mistakes, and they did. They made some big mistakes, saying that Jesus is part of a trinity, or statues are allowed and icons are allowed. And the Russian Orthodox Church is a huge promoter of icons and images. That's really a large part of it. Look at what they're involved in today. We're standing on the edge of World War III, and they're saying that Putin is, they're supporting him. So, and then you have the largest sect of Christianity in the world, the Catholics, and they obviously highly support the use of statues and images and icons and the idea that Mary is somehow God also. When in the New Testament, Jesus made it pretty clear that, well, it seemed clear to me that Mary wasn't as much a believer as his disciples, as the people around him. You know, I recall that verse, that topic very clearly. I can't quote it, but you probably recall it too if you read it. You know, so the idea that there's a mother that's God and a son that's God and a father that's God, that came from something else that existed long before Christianity. Many of the pagan religions of the world, they had this trinity of gods that was a father, son, and mother. It existed. They had pictures of it. Books have been written about this. It's been proven, like, matter of fact. There's so much evidence about this father, son, wife trinity of gods existing for hundreds of years before Jesus came, thousands of years even. Not many thousands, but it's not what Jesus taught. Jesus said the flesh is of no avail. The flesh is not about the flesh. Read John 6. It's about the Spirit. It's about his teachings. It's not about his flesh rising 3 days later, 3 literal days later. I explained this in my other prophecies. That was a prophecy that uses math which can be solved, and it gives the years when Muhammad, the Bab, Baha'u'llah began their ministries very clearly in multiple times, different ways. It's miraculous, actually. The reality of Jesus' 3-day prophecy is truly miraculous, because the reality of the common interpretation that his physical body rose 3 literal days later is patently, blatantly false. It's if you read the New Testament for yourself and actually count how many hours and how many complete days Jesus was in the cave, you'll see that it's not 3 days at all. This has been debated by Bible scholars a lot. It's more half that time. And it's either half that time or a little bit more, because there's different accounts that can be used. But it's not 3 whole days. And, the Jesus 3-day prophecy was... And Jesus, he repeated this prophecy a lot. This isn't just some off, possible error. He repeated this over 20 times, according to one source, when I Googled it. Or at least he referred to the subject, that, destroy the temple, 3 days it'll be rebuilt. This is the sign of the times. It's the sign of Jonah. As Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. 3 days and 3 nights is a full 3 days. The Jewish day begins, Hebrew day begins sunset to sunset. And that's a full Hebrew day. Begins and ends at sunset. So, if you look at the text, it's very clear. It's not Jesus' body that rose from the dead. It's some sort of symbology, and it's very well fulfilled in Muhammad, the Bab, Baha'u'llah. People think Muhammad's like the enemy of Christianity. He's not. Islam was usurped as soon as Muhammad died. It was usurped and tainted. Their beliefs and the hadiths and things that have been added on to the teachings of Muhammad that shouldn't be there. So, this idea that Islam and Christianity have to be mortal enemies is absurd. It's really not the way it is. And they don't have to disagree so fundamentally, especially when you look at the reality of Christianity, the reality of what Jesus did. So, Jesus said in John 6, you got to eat his flesh. then you can live forever. You gotta drink his blood. Well, this eating of his flesh isn't about eating bread at church. That was a reminder throughout the years. It's been 2,000 years. A reminder that to pay attention to this. Look at this. This is how Jesus freed the world from sin. When he died at that exact time, he was telling the world when he would return. It was all about when he would return. And Jesus' last discourse in John, before it was taken away to be crucified, he repeated certain themes. You got to know the new name when he returns. It's going to be like Parakletos, and that's very similar to the name Muhammad in Greek. Very similar, almost. There's no other word that comes that closely to the name of Parakletos than Muhammad. The translation of Muhammad in Greek, or praise. So Muhammad's name means praised or raised up or exalted. So it's these very verses that point so clearly to Muhammad that the Christian scholars have confused to think that it's talking about the Trinity. That's where it talks about the Holy Ghost. It's not Jesus' physical body that's going to return. It's the spirit within him. That's what he explains in John 6. It's not the flesh is of no avail. That doesn't matter. It's what is his teachings. It's the body of his teachings and the body of the reality. The reality of Jesus' body is what died on the cross. When it died on the cross is a prophecy for telling everybody. It's like a big sign pointing to the promised ones. So we can all live together in peace and harmony and share the resources and not see each other as the other or the enemy or the ones that need to be conquered and controlled and dominated. We don't need to have that mindset anymore. The world can have peace. The world can live in peace. We don't need to create a hellish nightmare, a world. And where's the source of this hellish nightmare stuff where a quarter of the world's population, the Muslims, and half the world's populations, the Christians, are in such, or not half, but a third of the world's population, the Christians are so concerned with controlling and manipulating and conquering and ruling over each other and fighting and defending. And where's this come from? It's a snake. That's what the Great Pyramid shows everybody. It's that awful serpent. Way at the beginning in Genesis. He screwed everybody up and kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. Well, we're in kind of a Garden of Eden now. After World War III plays out, there's no telling what kind of mess we're going to be in. Thanks a lot, serpent. You messed it up for everybody. So we gotta move beyond this serpent teachings. That's the source of all this. Jesus called the clergy, Sadducees and Pharisees, a den of vipers. He called them a den of vipers. So there's the horn. This needs to be spread to everybody. Everybody needs to know this. We need world peace. People need to think with their intellect and their brain and see the reality of the prophecies. Look at my other videos. You'll see it's beyond all shadow of a doubt. It's so often repeated. All these prophecies that point to these promised ones. It's impossible to deny. Not only does God give the year when the promised one will come. Yeah, Jesus said no man knows the day or the hour. Well, I'm talking about the year, and that's what all these prophecies point to, is the year. But often in the same book, in the same chapter, it'll have just about every qualifier and quality of a promised one that one could put there, describing, who he is and exact location, the area that he's going to appear at, and perhaps what he's going to be wearing, what color his clothes are going to be, and in some places it has that, and his name and the meaning of the name, and What else can you have? The year in which he began his ministry, the year that he was born. It has all these facts, all this information. What he's going to do, how he's going to make a difference in the world of religion. It's not just in. Usually, it's repeated in different places. All these facts are like the same chapter in different places, or if it's not the same chapter, it's in one chapter, and then there's another chapter referring to it, very clearly referring to it in the same book, like Ezekiel 4, and later on in Ezekiel, it references the siege of the city, so it's pointing to the same thing. It unites it. It has like all these. It describes everything there, that narrows down the promised one to one person. It's like on Google Maps, you just keep zooming into one person until you're right on his bullseye. You're right at his head. So this is the reality of the religion of God. This is a big picture. It all came from Father Abraham, the father of many nations. He had 3 wives. Keturah, the mother of Buddhism, Hinduism, the mystery religions, which are so old. Many of their teachings have been lost, and many of them have fallen into extreme corruption of believing in several gods, or not a god at all. Zoroastrianism. So that was Keturah. She sent her son to the east, or she was sent to the east, and she had sons. But another one of Abraham's wife, I can't recall much about Keturah actually. The name means incense. But the other one was Sarah, and that was his blood wife, and that means princess, royalty, princess. And she had the son Isaac, which means laughter or funny. And, from Isaac, Isaac had the chosen lineage, and he had these blessings. God blessed his seed. The sperm of Abraham was blessed just as the sperm of King David was blessed. And the idea of sperm being evil and dirty and bad and wrong is no longer acceptable. It's a new age, and Baha'u'llah has purified all things when he came, and sperm is no longer unclean. So, the Christians have tried to separate themselves and exalt Jesus to, a divinity that he is not. He is not God, and reject all the other promised ones by having these ideas and these superstitions about sperm. It's not. It's unclean and it's sin, and Jesus had no part in it, so he's special. But that's not what it is. That's not the way it is, and that's not what the Bible teaches, and there's scripture that backs that up. So yeah, Abraham's seed was blessed. That's his scrotum, his sperm. Seed means sperm. So from Abraham came the chosen lineage to his son Isaac, and from there you have Christianity, the Jewish religion, the Baha'i religion, and these all came from Isaac, the chosen lineage. Baha'u'llah is a descendant from Abraham and King David, so he is actually a Messiah as well. So the other wife was Hagar, which means flight, and like when Muhammad fled to Medina, Muhammad descends from Hagar, and his name is praised and uplifted and exalted, and the Bab descended from Muhammad as well, and the 12 Imams. So that's the true path of Islam. That is the Shia path with the 12 Imams, and the Bab, or the gate, came out of that. So you're welcome to check out the many prophecies, especially they're in my other videos that go over the vast details of so many years that were pointed to, all pointing to the same things very clearly and very accurately, using the most pivotal, most important, most significant events in religious history and the dates that those things happen according to historical record. And it goes forward the given amount of time that the prophecies tell you to go forward, and it's always the same people over and over. It always matches up. And usually one prophecy won't just point out the coming of Jesus, but often one prophecy will point to Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah, like all four. or maybe all three if you leave out the Bob. So it's miraculous, or just all three in Jesus, Muhammad, and the Bob, or just Jesus and, let's see, in the Bob is in Daniel 9 and 8. And if you include the 1260 value, that would include Islam as well. This says Daniel 7 through 9, you have Muhammad, the Bob, and Jesus Christ. So yeah, many of the prophecies, they point to many future promised ones all in the same area, the same region, as I showed you in that picture a little while ago. That's from Amos 9. It's just miraculous, and it's undeniable, and it's scientific, and it's valid, and it's provable. Anyone can prove this to themselves if he's just on his watch, like Jesus says, be on your watch. Anyone can see this with their own eyes. It's time to look, because the world needs this, and make a movie of it, make a book of it. And I don't care if you profit from it. I don't want any share. I don't want any money I don't want donations from anybody. Please keep that to yourself. But get this out to the people. And I hope that you fall in love with the promised one of the day and age in which we live. That's what it's all about. Who is the true one for today? That's what it's all about. You got to look with your own eyes and think with your own knowledge and do your own research and verify things and dig and spend time and look.